Let's move on to Tony Abbott's accusation of the Gillard government of trying to muzzle the media during an address on freedom of speech. The opposition leader was speaking at an event organised by the conservative think tank, the Institute of Public Affairs. Mr Abbott rejected the need for a new media regulator, saying it could be used to enforce political correctness. He also confirmed that a future coalition government would remove a section of the Racial Discrimination Act banning statements which cause offence based on race or ethnicity, because, he says, that stifles free speech.
Now, it's human nature to support free speech only as long as it's agreeable, but the trouble is deciding which opinions can be censored. The danger is that a government which can censor a free press is more than capable of censoring a free people. Now, the price of free speech, which we must be prepared to pay, is that offence will be given, facts will be misrepresented, and sometimes lies will be told. Truth, after all, only emerges from such a process.
I wonder, Rachel, Con, the notion of truth emerging from this sort of, cauldron of intense emotion, is that something that you believe in these days in contemporary political debate?
Well, I certainly believe in free speech, and I think that we have to be looking not so much on the issue of free speech, but the quality of that speech. And if there's a concern in media today that I have, it's the quality of media reportage and coverage.
What do you mean?
Well, the increasing emphasis on opinion rather than clear and factual reporting. I think perhaps that's one of the problems. Since there is so much more focus on opinion, there's likely to be more of this kind of offence given, perhaps
almost
personal
willfully,
opinions, willfully. But I do think, from what I read, he was still quite clear. Abbott was clear that there would be something on the books that would make the attack on particular groups an offence, particularly if it was gratuitous and caused incitement. That's what I read today in the press.
It's a pretty big thing, though, isn't it, Alan Dupont, that he's talked about removing that item from the Racial Discrimination Act, which I presume is the one that Andrew Bolt was effectively convicted on. So this is quite a move by the opposition leader.
Yeah, look, I actually think that the government's in danger of kicking an own goal here. What I find ironic about this situation is that Labor is seeking to basically basically modify the right to free speech, okay? Now, I'm not sure politically how that plays to its own constituency, how a large number of Labor supporters, how they feel about that. So I think what Labor have done is by pursuing this issue in a fairly clumsy way, in my view, they've given Tony Abbott and the coalition an opening to run with this. So now Tony Abbott can portray himself as the champion of free speech. So I find that at a political sort of level quite interesting the way that's playing out.
Do you agree with that, Stephen?
I do. I'm strongly of the view that Rachel's put that free speech is something that we have to protect in most, I'm not saying there aren't limits to it, but in most circumstances that one should be very loath to tamper with. I've never really understood the basis of the stronger media scrutiny that Finkelstein and his report were supposed to be bringing in. It seems to me that the big issue is media ownership.
I heard somebody the other day say that some papers have become the outrage factory. And I myself have noticed that, and you almost pull back from the sort of the shrillness of it to winkle people out of their different corners. People have got to become steadily more shrill, which probably does diminish the public debate.
That's what Rachel's talking about when she talks about the quality of the media coverage being debased.
I'm quite concerned.
Who governs that, I suppose, or should anyone?
Well, I'm quite concerned that with this emphasis on the restraint of free speech, we end up having something equivalent to secular blasphemy laws, that in the end we end up with societies that are actually just boiling with unexpressed violence, which then comes out. I mean, it's interesting that the Pew Forum looked at countries that had blasphemy laws, and they were the ones that were the most socially violent. And that's interesting, because the outrage which such blasphemy laws incite, actually, is perhaps equivalent or more so than the actual original comment that might have aroused hurt feelings. I'm very concerned about groups saying, we've been hurt by that, because I wonder whether in the end those laws end up protecting certain groups and not others. For example, is it okay to call a Catholic priest an arrogant Catholic priest, and not okay to call someone an arrogant Muslim, because they have both caused some ire, raised some ire in the general public. And I tend to think that these laws will end up being effective for some groups and not others.
Look, I agree entirely, Rachel. I think this is a very dangerous road to go down. Okay, we all know that occasionally the press does go overboard with its coverage. And we've had the fiasco in the UK with the News of the World and News Limited. Okay, so that's something we don't want to see. But on the other hand, trying to legislate against that in the way that the government seems to be trying to do is really counterproductive in my view, and contrary to all the basic tenets of a free society in which we all live. So I think they'd be much better off leaving this alone, but unfortunately they've gone too far now, so they're going to have to get some outcome. And my concern is that you're going to get the worst of all worlds here. You're still going to have the irresponsible, if you like, press coverage. That's going to continue, because I don't think you can prescribe that. But you're going to start to get you're going to get political correctness creeping in, and the erosion of free speech.
Look, you're probably right, but gee, some of the speech is awful, and some of the blogs, and people just feel the capacity to say whatever they like, and how you peg that back, I suppose.
But there's a difference between that and a criminal offence,
True.
Geraldine. I mean, Rebecca Brooks and her cronies have been indicted under, for criminal offences under the Crimes Act. I mean, putting aside the fact that Tony Abbott's talking about winding back this section of the Anti-Discrimination Act, Andrew Bolt was convicted of a breach of the Anti-Discrimination Act. It's quite a separate thing
from just codes and
media scrutiny. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we're talking about the Olympics. Some of the coverage of the Olympics could be seen to have fallen into that category. We'll talk about that a bit later.